And so they started 2 afternoons a week and did it for a long time, and more kids kept coming. They started with 7 kids, and now it's a couple of years later, and they do it every day of the week with volunteers from the community. It's not just the members of the church, but volunteers every day of the week, and they have over 50 kids. To the point where I talked to Peg, the rector, last year. I like to keep up on them because I love this story. And it was this time last year I called her and I said, well, how's it going? And she said, it was right after Halloween, and she said, we were talking about just closing it down that day because they were going trick-or-treating, and should we staff it? And they asked the kids, and the kids said, oh, we want to come here. Don't cancel it for the day. We want to come here, and we'll go trick-or-treating afterwards, or we'll trick-or-treat here. That's how much, and they didn't do it to grow, but some of the parents of the kids are now members, new members of the church. So now their average Sunday attendance is 40 instead of 25. And they're much more viable 2 years later than they were when they did the cat. And they're thrilled. They're proud of themselves, and they feel like they're doing something God wants them to do in that community. And they don't apologize, and they don't apologize to the parents. They do a little bit of Sunday school in the after-school program. They're not, purposefully evangelizing, but they had the kids build Jonah and the whale. The kids built this big whale out of black garbage bags. So they're getting a little bit of story, but it's the story of, how to be good people. And so they don't shy away from that either. So it's possible, and I have seen small congregations like yours who get very focused on their mission and really in touch with what the community needs, and then decides, can we commit ourselves? Is this what God wants us to commit ourselves to help those in need? And typically they grow some because of it. That's not their purpose. Purpose is to serve God. I think that's your work here. That's your work. And I wouldn't wait around for a rector to do that work. You can do this on your own. You are not a rector-centric parish. You can do this on your own, and any rector candidate that Canon Tidy comes up with for you, no pressure, Canon Tidy, would rather come on board a congregation that the train's left the station and is moving than have to come on board and spend a whole year shoveling coal into the engine to get it started. So you can do this. You can do this. I know you can. So, and where you are, this transition, I add this one because I think there needs to be some clarity. Congregations that fall where you are, I call this quadrant transitional because I don't want you to forget. Transitional congregations have strengths and challenges, and I want them to appreciate their strengths and not just say, oh, it's negative. Your picture is not. And so you're transitional. You're transitioning from where you've been, and and now you're in this rector search, but you're not. You're not in a search, but you're transitioning to a place where you hope you'll have a rector, and I used at convention the image or the analogy of evolution. You're evolving. And I think that's what God wants us to do, is as congregations, He doesn't want us to stay static because God's creation is always changing. And so there are always different needs. And God wants us to attend to God's children in new ways. And so you're transitioning to understanding your mission and what God wants you to do. You're going to take the best of what's been. You might take on some new attributes and become then a new picture of yourselves. That's how I look at it. Okay? All right. Let's go to page 7. We want to beg the question with you, well, if we're not all 100% satisfied, where might we put our energy to improve that satisfaction? And so we do the statistical analysis, and the number one satisfier would be an improvement of your worship experience. And I don't know what that means. That's where you need to explore more, maybe in a congregational conversation. Have a coffee hour where you intentionally set up conversation and say, okay, we said that we would be more satisfied, a sense of well-being, peace, uplifted, if worship were improved. What does that look like for people? And what's possible in a small congregation? And to have that conversation and see what comes from it and what's possible and who might contribute to it. Yeah.
Okay, so in our situation where we have rotating priests, we get different worship services each time. So if they're not satisfied, how can we improve the rotating priest if we don't have a single priest doing the same thing every time?
Right. So maybe, I don't want to be heretical here, maybe a little more directive of the priests and say, there are some of us who are going to be more involved in the worship service. This is how we do it here, and we would very much like you to get on board with that. You know, obviously you need the priest to consecrate the bread and wine, and but maybe some of you would like to preach now and then. Or maybe the sermon is storytelling with each other about how God has touched your life this past week. Believe it or not, Episcopal churches do this, especially smaller ones. And in some cases, the smaller ones where people use the sermon time to share how God has touched their life in the past week, they get really comfortable with sharing their faith with each other. And then they get really comfortable sharing their faith outside the church. And then they get really comfortable inviting new people to church. So this is an overused phrase, Michelle, but I would just dream big, think out of the box, and instead of feeling like you're, in a, what are those machines? Those, the ones where the balls, this pinball. Instead of feeling like you're in a pinball machine, one week having this priest who does things one way, and the next week, and you don't know where you are, and there's just not this sense of ownership of what you're doing each week. Take control of that. You can. And make it your own. Because then if you make it your own, you have ownership of it. I think that fact in and of itself will improve how people feel about the worship experience. It's just a thought. Yeah.
You already introduced the fourth Sunday of the month. When you take responsibility for the worship yourselves, you could actually use that time to have the kind of conversation amongst yourselves that Susan just indicated. One of you could just tell your story. You could take it in turns, month by month, and tell their story. So I really think that That's a wonderful opportunity. I mean, you've already created it, to make good use of it. And perhaps use that conversation also just to kind of figure out what it is that would be more satisfying in terms of your worship Sunday, so that you know what it is you want to say to the people who come.
Yeah, and let it evolve. I mean, it won't happen, you know, in the first conversation, but you may have to do it several times. Yeah.
Yeah, the morning prayer has definitely worked, I feel has worked well for us. And we do give an opportunity for people to share what they thought of the gospel reading, the gospel, and it seems like people have enjoyed that. And so, but I like how you're saying about even the coffee hour, just kind of feel for the new people that have to come, and just kind of get a feel for what they are wanting,
Yeah.
what they need.
Yeah, absolutely. And the more of you that will get involved in that kind of conversation, the better. And I think in a congregation like this, at some point, every single person is going to have to say, if I want things to improve here, then I have to spend a little time, and I have to step up. All of you need to step up, even if it's an extra hour a week doing something. That's what it's going to take. Okay? And the benefits will come. I guarantee you. All right, let's go to page 8. Here are all the priorities.